Hello and thank you for joining us for this video focused on entity management and JUST grants. We are happy to have you here today and hope to provide you with the information you need to manage the various entity management processes in JUST grants. My name is Andre Isabella and I will be walking you through the steps you need to learn to manage your entity in JUST grants. This video will guide you through the process of managing your entity. We will start with an overview of entity management, including a discussion about the role and responsibilities of the entity administrator, as well as the remaining 5 JUST grants user roles. We will also introduce the 4 Equal Employment Opportunity Program or EEOP user roles. Then, we will review how to initially onboard the entity during application submission, including information about how JUST grants uses data you provide to other federal systems. We will discuss entity management specifics such as entity user management in both JUST grants and the Digital Identity and Access Management Directory, or DIAMOND system. We will also review specifics about managing the entity profile, entity users, roles, awards, and assignments, and provide direction for managing planned and unplanned changes to the entity administrator role. We will then review some of the entity administrator tasks when it comes to maintaining and managing entity documents. Finally, we will show you where to find additional resources and assistance as you navigate SAM.gov, DIAMOND, and JUST grants. Alright, let me now hand things over to Isabella to begin our discussions about entity management. She'll start with an overview of exactly what an entity is and then discuss what an entity administrator does.
Thanks. So, the term entity refers to applicants and award recipients. Each entity has unique identifiers such as legal name, doing business as name, and 1 or more alphanumeric identifiers. In JUST grants, there are 2 distinct types of entities: organizations and individuals. Most entities in JUST grants are considered organizational entities. There are many types of organizational entities, such as nonprofits, American Indian tribes, state or local governments, and institutions of higher learning. Organizational entities must register and maintain an active registration status in SAM.gov in order to access federal funding. The SAM.gov Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI, is considered the primary alphanumeric identifier for organizational entities in JUST grants. Now, an individual entity is a person, not an organization, applying for grant funding. Typically, an individual entity applies for a fellowship grant program, and individual entities do not need to register in SAM.gov. Instead, individual entities should use their Internal Revenue Service Federal Tax ID Employee Identification Number, also known as an EIN, or a Tax Identifier Number, also known as a TIN, as their alphanumeric identifier. And, for security purposes, individuals should not apply using a Social Security number as their unique identifier. The entity administrator is a critical user in JUST grants. Every entity must have 1 user designated as the entity administrator. They act as the entity's gatekeeper and bear responsibility for managing entity users, roles, and assignments in JUST grants. Entity administrators also ensure the accuracy of the entity profile in JUST grants and coordinate applicable changes in SAM.gov. They also maintain entity documents within JUST grants. 3 federal systems support ongoing entity management. First up is SAM.gov, the federal government's source of truth for entity identifiers. Organizational entities must maintain an active registration and ensure their entity information remains current. Other federal systems use entity data from SAM.gov as well. Next, we have the Digital Identity and Access Management Directory, or DIAMOND, which is the DOJ's secure user management system. The entity administrator determines who should have access to entity data and invites those individuals to be entity users. The entity administrator keeps entity users and their roles up to date and reassigns the entity administrator role as needed. Finally, you will work with JUST grants, the DOJ's grants management system. The entity administrator assigns and reassigns entity users to specific applications and awards. The entity administrator also uploads entity-level documents into the system. Let's take a look now at the 6 user roles. User roles allow specific functions and features in JUST grants, and a user can have 1 or more than 1 role assigned based on the type of work they need to do in JUST grants. Let's look first at the entity administrator. An entity administrator manages users and keeps the entity profile information current. They also confirm the authorized representative's legal authority to enter into contracts, grants, and cooperative agreements with the federal government on behalf of the entity. Entity administrators also have read-only access to all applications and awards in JUST grants. They have a bird's eye view of everything. If the entity administrator needs to take some part in managing awards or applications, that person can be assigned additional roles that allow them to do so. And note that there is only one entity admin per entity. Let's look next at the authorized representative. The authorized representative is the only role that may accept or decline an award on behalf of the entity. This role must be assigned to someone in the organization with the legal authority to enter into contracts, grants, and cooperative agreements with the federal government on behalf of the entity. The entity administrator confirms the authorized representative's legal authority, and there can be one or two authorized reps depending on the awarding office. Next up is the application submitter. The application submitter is the only role that can enter data into an application, certify it, and then submit it on behalf of your entity. You can have between 1 and 3 application submitters assigned to an application at any one time in JUST Grants. Next up is the Grant Award Administrator. The Grant Award Administrator submits programmatic award requirements, including performance reports, grant award modifications, and portions of the closeout. There can be one per award. JUST Grants also has an alternate Grant Award Administrator role available. This alternate Grant Award Administrator role is an additional programmatic role that will provide support to the Grant Award Administrator. They can edit and submit performance reports and grant award modifications. There is a maximum of 1 per award, but this role is optional. The last of the 6 roles is the Financial Manager. The Financial Manager certifies and submits federal financial reports on behalf of the organization. There is 1 Financial Manager role available per award. Next, Andre will take us through the EOP roles in JUST Grants.
Thanks, Isabella. Certain entities that receive DOJ funding are required to submit an Equal Employment Opportunity Plan. The purpose of the EEO plan is to ensure that entities receiving DOJ financial assistance are providing full and equal employment opportunities to prospective employees. There are 4 EOP roles, each with unique duties. Individual users can only be assigned 1 EOP role in addition to any JUST Grants roles they have been assigned. At this point, Isabella and I will do some troubleshooting as we run through several questions that come in regularly to support. So Isabella, how do I find out who is the entity administrator for my entity within JUST Grants?
We are often asked how to know who in an organization is the assigned entity administrator. In JUST Grants, use the left navigation menu, click the Entity Users tab to show all users and roles granted to the user by the entity administrator in Diamond. It also shows the roles associated with each user, but it does not show who has been assigned a role on a specific award or application.
Okay, so the entity administrator has left the organization, and no one can log in or make changes. How do we fix this?
Sure. Ideally, the entity administrator will delegate this role to another user before they leave. If the user is no longer available, the JUST Grants support desk will have to invite a new entity administrator based on the current SAM eBiz point of contact. Keep in mind, if an entity administrator leaves your organization without reassigning, no one will be able to update user records or assign work. The best way to fix this is to update the eBiz point of contact in SAM.gov, then contact the JUST Grants support desk. That updated eBiz POC it will be assigned as the entity administrator. In a few minutes, we'll demonstrate how easy it is for an entity administrator to reassign that role prior to leaving for a vacation, medical leave, or permanent leave.
Okay, so SAM.gov allows an entity to assign an alternate eBiz point of contact. Should we do this?
This question about SAM.gov comes up often. SAM.gov provides an option to enter both an eBiz point of contact as well as an alternate eBiz point of contact. This field is frequently left blank or the same person is listed twice. But we say yes. Take advantage of this field to ensure backups are readily available should there be changes in your staff. Not having an alternate will delay your entity moving forward in the process if your eBiz POC is not available.
Let's now look at initial onboarding and discuss how a new entity creates a JUST Grants account through the application submission process. Two federal systems are critical to initial entity onboarding. For entities that are new to JustGrants, the initial entity onboarding process occurs during application submission and relies on the following two federal systems for critical onboarding data. Organizational entities seeking federal funding are required to register and maintain an active status in SAM.gov. For this reason, SAM.gov is considered the federal government's source of truth for organizational entity identifiers. If an organizational entity is new to JustGrants, the SAM.gov eBiz point of contact is automatically onboarded as the entity administrator in JustGrants. Once onboarded into JustGrants, the SAM.gov eBiz POC can transfer the entity administrator role to another entity user.
For entities that are new to JustGrants, the initial entity onboarding process is triggered when an entity submits an application for Department of Justice funding in grants.gov, where entities first apply as part of the two-step grant application process. Once JustGrants receives the grants.gov application, the entity administrator receives an email with onboarding instructions. For individual entities, initial entity onboarding bypasses SAM.gov and relies solely upon information provided in the grants.gov application. Individuals must use one alphanumeric identifier, usually the EIN or TIN, consistently in JustGrants.
For entities new to JustGrants, the initial entity onboarding process occurs during application submission and relies on two federal systems for critical onboarding data. Organizational entities seeking federal funding are required to register and maintain an active status in SAM.gov. For this reason, SAM.gov is considered the federal government's source of truth for organizational entity identifiers. If an organizational entity is new to JustGrants, the SAM.gov eBiz point of contact is onboarded as the entity administrator in JustGrants. Do note, for individual entities, initial entity onboarding bypasses SAM.gov and relies solely upon information provided in the grants.gov application. Individuals must use one alphanumeric identifier consistently in JustGrants. Grants.gov is a federal website that provides access to funding opportunities for multiple government agencies. To apply for funding, you will need to log into grants.gov using credentials that are linked to your SAM.gov account. Once logged into grants.gov, you will search for funding opportunities, select the correct competition ID and submit the SF424 and SFLL forms. These are standard government forms. Once JustGrants receives the grants.gov application, the entity administrator receives an email with onboarding instructions. Diamond and JustGrants are the two DOJ systems that enable entities to manage users and work. The entity administrator uses Diamond to manage entity users and their roles. The entity administrator then assigns users to awards and applications in JustGrants. Once entity users complete the Diamond registration process, they can log into JustGrants and complete any assigned work.
Let's take a few minutes now for Andre and I to troubleshoot some other common initial onboarding questions.
Okay, so as a first-time DOJ applicant, what happens if our entity's SAM.gov registration expires or is newly activated?
For entities new to JustGrants, the system only receives information from SAM.gov when an entity's registration has an active status. Confirm your status at SAM.gov. You can use the Check Entity Status function to confirm this status. It is a good idea to verify the SAM.gov account is active prior to beginning the application process if possible. When the SAM.gov status is activated, JustGrants typically receives the information within 1 to 5 days.
Our SAM eBiz POC did not receive a DOJ or Diamond email invitation. What should we do?
Okay, so first check the POC's spam folder and look for an email from diamond-no-reply@usdoj.gov. Users may also receive emails from do not reply at ojp.doj.gov or ojp@servicenowservices.com.
Another common question is, what if our SAM.gov eBiz POC is already associated with an existing entity in JustGrants?
Well, an individual user's email address can only be associated with one entity in JustGrants. So if the SAM.gov eBiz POC is already associated with an existing entity in JustGrants, they will need to establish and use a unique email address for each entity in JustGrants or be removed as a user in the existing entity. An individual user's email address can only be associated with one UEI in JustGrants.
Final question, can our entity use the SAM.gov alternate eBiz POC for onboarding?
SAM.gov does allow entities to identify an alternate eBiz POC. In the event of a JustGrants conflict with the primary SAM.gov eBiz POC, entities may elect to use this alternate POC for initial onboarding. The Alternity Biz POC should contact JustGrants technical support for onboarding assistance.
Let's now take a look at the two systems that are responsible for entity user management, Diamond and JustGrants. Entity user management is performed in two intersecting DOJ systems, Diamond and JustGrants. Diamond ensures that only authorized users, those designated by the entity administrator, can access entity information in JustGrants. Each entity can have only one entity administrator. Only the entity administrator can make changes in Diamond. The entity administrator uses Diamond to invite new entity users and add and remove roles as needed. Once the entity administrator invites new entity users, Diamond sends an email to those users with instructions to register and log into JustGrants. The second system is JustGrants, and JustGrants is where entity users complete DOJ grant-related activities. Entity administrators assign entity users to specific applications and awards using JustGrants. And once an entity user is assigned to an application or award, they will receive assignments and take actions associated with their assigned role or roles. Successful entity user management depends on sequential actions taken by both the entity administrator and entity users. The entity administrator invites each entity user and assigns roles to each entity user in Diamond. Each entity user receives an instructional email from Diamond once the entity administrator has invited them to register. Entity users must complete the actions outlined in the email within 72 hours. These actions include setting up their password and multi-factor authentication and logging into JustGrants at initial time. After entity users have logged into JustGrants that initial time, their accounts become active, and the entity administrator can make user assignments in JustGrants. The entity administrator assigns applications to one or two authorized representatives and up to 3 application submitters. Entity admins also assign awards to one or two authorized representatives, one grant award administrator, and one financial manager. After applications and awards are assigned by the entity administrator, the entity user logs into JustGrants and takes action on their assigned applications and awards. Okay, Isabella and I will now troubleshoot a few questions seen during the invitation process in JustGrants. We often are asked if I invited a new entity user in Diamond, why don't I see them listed in the Entity Users section in JustGrants?
After the EA invites a user in Diamond, they will get an email from the system, diamond-no-reply@usdoj.gov. The user must follow the email instructions and log in within 72 hours, or the EA will need to re-invite them. Check with the entity user to confirm they have taken these actions. If the user cannot locate the email, or if the link contained in the email expires, re-invite the user in Diamond. Once the user successfully logs into JustGrants, their name will appear in the Entity Users section of JustGrants.
Okay, what if I added or removed roles from an existing Diamond entity user? Why aren't those changes reflected in JustGrants?
Sure, just refresh the JustGrants screen. The changes should synchronize immediately.
All right, let's shift gears now into entity user management in Diamond.
Okay. Assigning entity users roles in Diamond is the first step in assigning entity users to awards and applications in JustGrants. Let's look at how the entity administrator invites entity users into Diamond. The Digital Identity and Access Management Directory System is commonly called Diamond. The entity administrator is the only person with access to Diamond, so you can see how important it is to maintain an active entity administrator.
Diamond ensures that only authorized users, those designated by the entity administrator, can access entity information in JustGrants.
Each entity can have only one entity administrator.
And only that entity admin can make changes in Diamond.
The entity admin uses Diamond to invite new entity users and add and remove roles as needed.
Then, once the entity administrator invites new entity users, Diamond sends an email to users with instructions to register and log into JustGrants.
Okay, let's take a look now at Diamond and the actions available to the entity administrator when they log into the system. When the entity administrator logs into Diamond, the screen displays options on buttons. Selecting these buttons allows the entity administrator to perform needed actions in Diamond. Use the View Entity button to view information such as the current entity administrator and entity users and their roles. Use the Manage Entity button to replace the current entity administrator with another active entity user or to remove users. The View User button provides the opportunity to view information about entity users, including their role or roles and the last invitation date.
The Invite Entity User button allows the entity administrator to invite new entity users. If the user does not have an existing Diamond account, a new account is created, and the user will receive an instructional email. The Re-Invite Entity User button allows the entity admin to send a new Diamond invitation email to reset the user's password and multi-factor authentications. The user must follow the instructions contained in the email. Upon completion, the user's account will be re-enabled.
The Manage Entity User button allows the entity admin to add or remove roles from an entity user or to remove the user from the entity.
Let's take a look in detail at each of these entity admin activities in Diamond. We'll start with the View Entity button.
The entity administrator can view the entity profile, which contains the entity ID, entity name, and entity doing business as name in the View Entity screen. They can also see the current entity administrator and entity usernames, email addresses, roles, and account status by selecting the View Entity button. To view entity information, select View Entity. To view all entity users, use the scroll feature located at the bottom right of the page. Entity accounts will be shown as enabled or disabled. The Cancel button allows the entity admin to exit the View Entity screen. Let's look now at how the entity admin can change the entity administrator role to another user.
The entity administrator is a critical entity role. Every entity must have one user assigned as the entity administrator. Entities should also be prepared to have a backup entity administrator in mind so the role can be reassigned quickly and easily. You can either plan for the absence or you must respond to an unplanned situation. The following points should be considered for a planned change in entity administrator.
First, identify which entity users can fulfill the entity administrator responsibilities. Once you've done that, ensure those users have access to training and critical entity information. To make the change in Diamond, the current entity administrator logs into Diamond and selects a user to assign as the new entity administrator. The next time the newly assigned entity administrator logs in, they will have access to all entity administrator-related duties.
The entity administrator can also access Diamond through their JustGrants account. To do so, when JustGrants opens to the home page, select the Entity Users option from the left side navigation menu. Once on the Entity Users page, select the Manage Users button located at the top left of the Entity Users page. Once they have selected the Manage Users button, the Entity Administrator's Diamond page will open. If the entity administrator is leaving the organization or even going on vacation, we highly recommend that they assign the role to someone else in their absence. If this role is not reassigned, it will not be possible to invite new users or assign users to awards or applications, resulting in delays in managing awards. For example, if a financial manager is not assigned to an award, no one will be able to complete a federal financial report, which may result in a suspension of funds. To reassign the entity administrator role to another user, the current entity administrator selects the Manage Entity button. Notice the Entity Profile and Current Entity Administrator sections are auto-populated with entity information. In the center of the screen, you will see the Entity Administrator Management section. Select the user that will take over this role by searching through the list of active users. Once you have selected the correct person, click the Next button located at the bottom of the Manage Entity page. After selecting Next, Diamond will ask for confirmation of the new entity administrator. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the Back button to make corrections, or select the Confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity page to proceed and change the entity administrator.
When the entity admin's absence is unplanned, there is a different process that will involve user support. So, an unplanned entity admin changes will require JustGrants user support assistance. First, the entity must onboard a new eBiz point of contact into SAM.gov. Once that step is complete, the entity must request that JustGrants user support confirm the entity's current SAM.gov eBiz POC and onboard that POC as the new entity administrator. The SAM.gov eBiz POC receives the instructional email from Diamond to register. Once registration is complete, the newly onboarded entity administrator logs in and assumes the entity administrator-related duties.
Let's look at this process in detail. When the entity is no longer available to transfer the entity administrator role to another user, the entity must take the following steps to onboard a new entity administrator.
In SAM.gov, confirm the entity's SAM.gov eBiz POC and update the POC in SAM.gov if needed. Alert the eBiz POC that they will be onboarded as the new entity administrator and should prepare for action.
In JustGrants, contact JustGrants support at justgrants.support@usdoj.gov or 833-872-5175. Advise that the entity administrator is no longer available and request to onboard the current eBiz POC as the new entity administrator.
The new eBiz POC receives an instructional email from Diamond and must successfully log into JustGrants within 72 hours.
In JustGrants, the new entity administrator logs in and assumes all entity administrator-related duties.
Okay, let's change gears now and take a look at a demonstration on how the entity admin can invite entity users to JustGrants. To invite entity users, the entity administrator must log into JustGrants. From the home page, select the entity users link on the left to view current users. The entity administrator can access Diamond from the JustGrants entity users list. Select the Manage Users button to open the My Apps screen for access to Diamond. Only the entity administrator can access Diamond and make changes to entity users. If an entity user does not know who their entity administrator is, look for the entity administrator icon in the entity users section. Each entity has only one entity administrator. Diamond is where the entity administrator invites, re-invites, and manages entity users. Once in Diamond, the entity administrator selects the Invite Entity User button to open the invitation page. Fields that are marked with the red asterisk are mandatory. It is not possible to submit if these fields are blank. The data in the entity profile section is auto-populated from the entity information entered in SAM.gov. Enter the entity user's email address, first name, and last name into the designated fields in the entity user profile section. Expand the Select Roles to add drop-down menu to view roles to assign to the entity user. Select a role or roles from the drop-down menu. The entity administrator can assign a single role or multiple roles to an entity user. After completing the entity user profile and the Select Roles to add, select the Next button located at the bottom right corner of the Invite Entity User page. After selecting the Next button, Diamond asks for the entity administrator to confirm the information entered in the entity user profile section and the assigned role or roles. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the Back button to make corrections, or the Confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Invite Entity User page to proceed and add the role to the entity user. After the entity administrator confirms the entity user profile information, an email is sent to the entity user from diamond-no-reply@usdoj.gov.
Now let's review the steps the entity admin needs to take to re-invite entity users. The entity administrator can re-invite an entity user in the following circumstances. An entity user's account is disabled. The entity user forgot their password and needs a reset. The links in the entity user instructional Diamond email have expired, which happens after 72 hours. The entity user gets a new phone number and needs to update their access. Or, the entity user does not receive an email invitation from Diamond to register their account. Now to re-invite an entity user, select the Re-invite Entity User button to search for a specific entity user and resend a Diamond invitation. You can search for the entity user to re-invite. The search can be conducted by first and last name or email address. Select the Next button located at the bottom right corner of the Re-invite Entity User page. Now use the displayed form to send a new registration link to an entity user's email address or to reset the entity user's password and multi-factor authentication selections. The entity user will need to update their existing password and multi-factor authentication selections using the link provided. If the entity user's account is currently disabled, then the entity user will be re-enabled prior to sending the new registration link. The data in the entity user profile is auto-populated. Enter the entity user's name or use the drop-down menu to select the entity user to be re-invited. Select the Next button located at the bottom right corner of the Re-invite Entity User page. After selecting Next, Diamond will ask for the entity administrator to confirm the information contained in the entity user profile section. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the back button to make corrections, or the confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Re-Invite Entity User page to proceed and add the role to the entity user. The re-invited user will receive an email invitation as they did previously.
How do you add or remove roles from an entity user? Let's answer that question with a short demonstration. One of the primary duties of an entity administrator is to continually manage entity users in Diamond. This includes adding and removing roles as entity user responsibilities change. Individual users can be assigned multiple roles in Diamond. When adding and removing roles for users in Diamond, the entity administrator should consider a few things. Who should have access to view the entity's information, applications, and awards in JustGrants? Generally, all entity users can view all entity information, aside from a user who only possesses the application submitter role. Who needs to take actions on specific applications and awards? What roles would enable those users to take those actions?
It's a good idea to have multiple users with multiple roles who can quickly receive reassignments in JustGrants during staff absences and changes.
To add or remove roles from entity users, the entity administrator will select the Manage Entity User button. Enter the desired entity user's name or use the drop-down menu to select the entity user to be added or removed. After selecting the entity user's name, the entity user profile auto-populates. Use the Select Roles drop-down menus to add or remove the relevant role or roles pertaining to the identified entity user. Both drop-down menus can be used at the same time. Then, select the Next button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity User page. After selecting Next, Diamond requires confirmation of the entity user's name and role or roles being added or removed. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the Back button to make corrections, or the Confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity User page to proceed and add or remove a role from an entity user.
Let's take a look now at how you remove a user from your entity in JustGrants. Part of the ongoing maintenance duties of the entity administrator includes keeping users and roles current in Diamond. This involves adding as well as removing entity users from Diamond. When an entity administrator needs to remove an entity user, for example, when a user is seeking to become a user with a different entity, or when a user is leaving an entity, the entity administrator must remove the user from Diamond. The entity administrator has two options to remove entity users from Diamond: the Manage Entity button or the Manage Entity User button. Select the Manage Entity button. This is the first option the entity administrator can use to remove an entity user from Diamond. In the Entity User Management section, enter the entity user's name in the Select Entity Users to remove drop-down list, or open the drop-down to choose the entity user from a list. Ensure the correct entity user is selected for removal and select the Next button located at the bottom of the Manage Entity page. The data in the Entity Profile section is auto-populated. After selecting Next, Diamond requires confirmation of the entity user being removed from the entity. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the Back button to make corrections, or the Confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity page to proceed and remove an entity user for an entity. The second option the entity administrator can use to remove an entity user from Diamond is the Manage Entity User button. Select the Manage Entity User button. Enter the desired entity user's name or use the drop-down menu to select the entity user to be removed. After selecting the entity user's name, the entity user profile auto-populates. Select the Remove User from Entity option. After selecting the Remove User from Entity option, a note appears at the bottom of the Manage Entity User page instructing the entity administrator on how to invite the entity user back into Diamond after being removed. Ensure the correct entity user is selected for removal and select the Next button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity User page. After selecting Next, Diamond requires confirmation to remove the entity user. Select the Cancel button to cancel the whole process, the Back button to make corrections, or the Confirm button located at the bottom right corner of the Manage Entity User page to proceed and remove an entity user.
Now let's turn to JustGrants and look at the Entity Administrator user management tasks there. Before we review some specific processes in JustGrants, let's get a brief overview of JustGrants. Just Grants is where entity users complete DOJ grant-related activities. This is where entity admins assign entity users to specific applications and awards. Once an entity user is assigned to an application or award, they receive assignments and take actions associated with their role. Let's start with a look at how the entity administrator assigns and reassigns users to applications. User assignments to applications are managed by the entity administrator on an application-by-application basis, enabling entities to manage users and assign work across an entity in one location. To assign and reassign entity users to applications, the entity administrator logs into Just Grants. Then, from the home page, they select the Applications option from the left side navigation window. Select the checkbox or checkboxes next to the application or applications being assigned or reassigned. Select the Choose Role drop-down menu to select the role to assign or reassign. Applications for the Office of Justice Programs, or OJP, and the Office on Violence Against Women, or OVW, will be assigned one authorized representative. Applications for the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS, will be assigned two authorized representatives. A list of users with the selected role appears in the Assigned a field. Select the Assign To drop-down menu to select the user to assign or reassign. If a user does not appear in the Choose User menu, the entity administrator will have to add that role to the user in Diamond. After choosing a role and a user to assign to that role, the Assign button becomes enabled. Select the Assign button. After selecting the Assign button, a confirmation page appears with the option to cancel or submit the assignment. Selecting the Cancel button will end the process and return to the application without changes. Select the Submit button to assign the application. The submission is confirmed by a text banner at the top of the page indicating the reassignment or reassignments have succeeded. Select the caret to the left of the checkbox to expand and review the application details. The entity administrator can review the application details. Edits can be performed using the drop-down menus and buttons at the bottom of the page.
Removing any additional application submitter roles as needed is another task the entity administrator performs to manage entity users in Just Grants. Let's look now at how this is done. The application submitter is a required role and cannot be deleted, only reassigned by the entity administrator. The second and third application submitters are not required roles and can be reassigned or deleted by the entity administrator. From the Applications page, select a caret next to an application to open the Application Detail page.
To learn more about how multiple application submitters access and work on applications, visit the Application Submission page of the Just Grants Resources website.
To remove the application submitter 2 or 3 roles from an application, select the trash can icon to the right of the application submitter 2 or 3 roles. After selecting the trash can icon, a confirmation page appears. Select the Submit button to remove the additional application submitter roles. Select the Cancel button to return to the application details without any changes. Return to the application details to confirm that the selected application submitter 2 has been removed. Only 2 application submitters are now assigned to this solicitation. You can also review this information by clicking the application ID to open this application or grant package. Then, check the Participants section located on the right side of the page. You will notice only Application Submitter and Application Submitter 3 are displayed. As with applications, the entity administrator also assigns or reassigns entity users to awards in Just Grants. Isabel, let's walk through the steps of that process now.
Sure. As with applications, entity user assignments to awards are managed by the entity administrator on an award-by-award basis, thereby enabling entities to effectively manage users and assign work across an entity in one location. To assign and reassign entity users to awards, the entity administrator logs into Just Grants and from the home page selects the Awards option from the left side navigation window. Select the Show or Hide Roles button to display the Roles drop-down menu. Select as many role checkboxes as necessary. The roles selected from this menu populate the awards table to display current assignments. Select the Cancel button to hide the drop-down menu without making any selections. Select the Confirm button after making role selections. Select the checkbox or checkboxes next to the awards being assigned or reassigned. Use the Choose Role drop-down menu located at the bottom of the page to select the role to assign or reassign. A list of users with the selected role appears in the Assign To field. Open the Choose User drop-down menu located at the bottom of the page to select the user to assign or reassign. If a user does not appear in the Choose User menu, the entity administrator will have to add that role to that user in Diamond. After choosing a role and the entity user assigned to that role, select the Assign button located at the bottom of the page to complete the action. Again, please note that users can only be assigned to roles they have been assigned in Diamond. After selecting the Assign button, a confirmation page will appear with the option to cancel or submit. Select the Cancel button to end the process and return to the award without changes. Select the Submit button to assign the user to the award. A submission confirmation is displayed in the banner at the top of the page. Select the caret to the left of the checkboxes to expand and review award details. The entity administrator can review the award details. If needed, the entity administrator can make edits using the drop-down menus and buttons located at the bottom of the page.
Let's look now at the entity profile.
Before we do, let me give you some background. The entity profile is a screen in JustGrants that shows an entity's critical identifying information. It's imperative that the entity administrator be familiar with this information, including entity name, alphanumeric identifiers, SAM.gov registration status, and current address. While most information displayed in this screen is pulled from SAM.gov, there are some fields an entity administrator must complete in JustGrants.
Thanks, Isabel. So to access the entity profile, log into JustGrants and select the Entity Profile option from the left side navigation window. Most of the information shown in the Entity Profile page is retrieved from the entity's SAM.gov profile. In JustGrants, the entity administrator must designate whether the entity is law enforcement or faith-based and designate the entity's legal address as the physical or mailing address.
The entity administrator can edit the following fields directly in JustGrants.
Law enforcement designation. This field defaults to no.
Faith-based designation. This field defaults to no.
The legal address designation. The options here are either the physical address or the mailing address. Select the Submit button located at the bottom right corner of the page to complete any profile changes made in JustGrants. An audit trail of entity profile changes is displayed in the History section located at the bottom of the Entity Profile page. Users can search the history by keyword, group, or field.
Okay, for our last demonstration, let's go through the process an entity administrator must follow to maintain entity documents. Entity administrators can upload documents to the Entity Documents section so that other entity and Department of Justice users can view and download selected documents for use on specific applications, awards, and monitoring activities. The documents located in this section apply to the entity as a whole or relate to multiple applications and awards, such as indirect cost agreements or financial capability questionnaires.
To view, add, or remove entity documents, the entity administrator logs into JustGrants and selects the Entity Documents option from the left side navigation window.
To download and view an entity document, select the file name. To view the document notes for an entity document, select the caret to the left of the file name and the section expands as shown. To add a new document, select the Add New Document button. After selecting the Add New Document button, a pop-up screen appears. Select the Select File option to upload a document. The types of documents that can be uploaded include doc, docx, PDF, or XLSM. Select the Cancel button to stop the document upload process and return to the Entity Documents page. Or fill in the confirmation page text fields and select the Submit button to complete the document upload process. Newly submitted entity documents appear in the document list. To delete an entity document, select the trash can icon located to the left of the file name columns. When the entity administrator selects the trash can icon to delete a document, a confirmation screen appears asking to confirm the deletion. However, if the document is associated with any other application or award, a pop-up appears stating, "Unable to delete, file is associated with the following case." A list showing the case ID and case information appears below the notice. The entity administrator will not be able to delete the document. Let's now take a look at the resources that are available to you. The Justice Grants website has much more information about Just Grants, including topic-specific training resources, user support information, as well as news and updates. Once you open the training link, you will see a list of training topics displayed. Select a topic to explore to open a page with training resources dedicated to that topic. Typically, you will find a job aid reference guide and quick reference guides. The job aid reference guides provide step-by-step instructions with screenshots to help you walk through a task. You can print these or view them on screen, depending on how you like to work. They are also a great reference if you are in the middle of a task and want to verify the next steps. The quick reference guides are short 3-4 page guides that walk you step-by-step through specific tasks. For grant application status, check the website from the 3 DOJ managing offices, COPS, OJP, and OVW. But for Just Grants technical issues, you should contact Just Grants technical support. To contact the COPS and OJP technical support desk, you can send an email to justgrants.support@usdoj.gov. You can also call 833-872-5175 Monday through Friday between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time, or between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time on weekends and federal holidays.
If you are an applicant or award recipient for an OVW award and need assistance, contact the OVW support desk at ovw.justgrantsupport@usdoj.gov or call 866-655-4482. Their hours are Monday to Friday 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern.
Please use the Just Grants support email or phone line for any issues that you may have when working in Just Grants. We offer our virtual question and answer series every week. Use the link shown here for specifics.
Post-award management sessions are held on Mondays from 1 to 2:30.
On Tuesdays, we hold this same entity management session, primarily focused on topics for entity administrators, between 2 and 3.
On Wednesdays, we hold our application mechanics sessions that primarily focused on topics for submitting an application between 2:30 and 4:30.
And on Thursdays, we offer sessions on award acceptance from 2 to 3. All classes are Eastern Time.
These upcoming sessions are repeated weekly and do not cover any new or updated material. If you've attended any of these sessions, you do not have to continue to attend them. But you are more than welcome to attend any of these sessions as many times as you choose.
Thank you so much for your time.
We hope that you found the information provided useful.